All right, I'm Pete Grigsby Jr. Of course, everybody knows me in the family, and we're in my living room at Minnie, Kentucky, in Floyd County, and it's a few days after Christmas. The 25th was on this past Thursday. Today is Sunday, December 28th, 2014. Pete and Michelle and I have been to church today down at Martin, and we've enjoyed the services, and we went to sacrament meetings and Sunday school and priesthood meetings, Relief Society meetings, of course. And we've been home this afternoon resting and eating a little bit, eating some of the Christmas food that's left over. So anyway, we're here with Pete and Michelle tonight, Sunday night, 28th, as I said, of December. And Pete's doing the filming and I'm doing the talking for because of the information that I want to leave to my posterity, to my family and loved ones, information that might be interesting to most people. So anyway, Pete, what do you want me to start out with?
Well, I think one of the favorite stories that your grandson, Pete the Fourth, likes hearing about is the KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Colonel Sanders story.
Okay.
And about when you were in high school, you met Colonel Sanders and his proposal to Grandpa Grigsby. So tell us that story and what he was trying to do to get Grandpa Grigsby to buy into.
Okay. Well, Pete the Fourth, this is mainly for you, since you're very interested in it. And of course, it'd be interesting to the rest of the family. Of course, I was raised in Martin, Kentucky, right in the middle of Martin. Martin was a great little town with just about anything that you needed in hospitals, and we had restaurants, theaters, drugstores. But Dad had a dime store and a clothing store. We had a school downtown. We had a ballpark. We had just everything at our fingertips in that town, restaurants and playgrounds and so forth. And it was a great little town to grow up in, and I grew up in it. And in 1952, 51, 52, I was a senior at Martin High School. We had a grade school and had a high school in Martin at that time. And I was educated in Martin Grade School, K through 8 there in town. And also next to it, we had a high school building, 9 through 12. In my senior year in 1951-52 at Martin, my father had a visit one day in the spring from Colonel Sanders. And Colonel Sanders was, I believe Joe Weddington was with him, or Happy Chandler, or maybe both of them. I can't recall. But anyway, Happy Chandler was a friend of ours, political friend, and they knew the family, Dad, Mom, and her parents, and practically everybody in Martin knew Happy Chandler. But anyway, he was in a real estate business with Joe Weddington, and the Colonel came to our house. I wasn't there, but Dad told me about it, and Mom. And he owned a restaurant in Lexington, Kentucky, one restaurant in Corbin, Kentucky, and another one. I'm not sure where the third. He owned 3 restaurants. The third one might have been in Richmond, Kentucky.
They were like cafes, weren't they?
Yeah. And he had been started for a few years, and he wanted to get out of the business. And he offered Kentucky Fried Chicken. He developed this restaurant, so they were called Kentucky Fried. Not KFC, but Kentucky Fried Chicken in those days. And he wanted to sell those restaurants to my father. And anyway, Dad did not buy. And I asked Dad later about it, why he didn't buy from Colonel Sanders. And he said, well, he didn't know the restaurant business. But anyway, during that period of time while they were negotiating and thinking about it, I graduated from Martin in the spring, and the Colonel brought me a gift. He brought me a gift, a graduation gift, that I really enjoyed and so forth. But I think my mother got it. I think it had something to do with cooking utensils and things, and electrical pans and whatnot, and so I really couldn't use it, and my mother used it. But I never will forget Colonel Sanders bringing me that gift, and I really treasured it. And I thought a lot about it over the years. And later, of course, it became KLC. And my good friend John Y. Brown Jr., whom I went to school with at University of Kentucky, John Y. Jr. and I were in the same class at the University of Kentucky. We were about the same age, and we got to know each other while he was a student and I was a student at UK. And John Y. Jr. Bought the franchise.
Brown.
John Y. Brown Jr., yes, who later became governor of the state. And before he became governor, he bought the KFC franchise from Colonel Sanders and started it in Salt Lake City.
So he bought the cafes, but John Y. Brown is the one who made it a chain, or not? Did he?
Yes, he made it. It became a chain, but John Y. Jr. bought it and expanded it. The Colonel kept the business and expanded it, and became the figurehead for Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Mm-hmm.
So later, when he wanted to sell out John Y. Brown Jr., I was told, after he got out of college, before he ran for governor of Kentucky, he bought the franchise, kept Colonel on as a figurehead, as a PR person, went around to the different restaurants and publicity as the Colonel of KLC. They changed it to KLC, and he started to enlarge and make it a worldwide chain in Salt Lake City. And he told me later as a friend, he and I were friends, that the Mormon people helped him with his franchise, KLC, and they were honest, hard-working people. And so later, that's another story I'll tell about later when we got the land for our chapel in Martin. That's who was governor, and I was a good friend of Governor Brown. And one of the reasons he let us have that property or sold it to us was because he knew the Mormon people. And he knew, I told him I was a Mormon and so forth. But anyway, that's another story. But Dad passed that up and kept his businesses there in Martin. And instead of going into a KFC or into the restaurant business, Dad added a Federated store, a clothing store, a furniture store, and he even had candy wholesale for a while there in Martin. And he became mayor a couple terms, 8-year terms, and when he wasn't mayor, he was on the city council in Martin.
Well, okay, but I remember he had the 5 and 10 store, a department store, which did very well.
Yes.
Then he added the Federated store. Is that correct? Did that come second?
Well, the clothing store was a Federated store.
All right, and that's this clothing store. That was next door.
Yeah.
And then what about Grandma? She had a music, right?
Yeah, across the street, Mother got involved in wanting to, after she got all the kids into school and everything, she wanted a store, and she started a music store across the street.
Okay.
And she ran that store for a while. And later, after she went out and they moved to Lexington, Dad had a furniture store in there. He and Lori Vernucci. Vernucci was a business partner of his. And but in the meantime, in 1959-60, these same men, headed up by Happy Chandler, Joe Wangton, and the great center fielder, I'll think of his name in a minute, of the Yankees, Earl Combs, came to my dad's house again. Joe Wangton, Earl Combs, and Happy Chandler, and offered him some property down on the Beltway there in Lexington. It was just being developed in '59.
Okay.
And Dad bought a piece of property, corner property, and built a motel on it. And he could have bought all that strip down through there. I asked Dad, I said, well, Dad, why didn't you buy all that? And he said, didn't have money.
Oh, but now that's all developed in Lexington.
And all of that property has been developed. All the New Circle Road, it's called. It used to be just 2-lane. Now it's 4-lane. And New Circle Road has long been developed. And Dad went down there in 1960 and opened up a Catalina motel. And he wanted to go into motel business. And he bought all the land that he thought he could afford, plus to build that motel.
So at one time, at his peak of his business career, he had how many stores in a motel?
Oh, gee, he had, like I said, at the time, he had a dime store. He had a clothing store, Federated store.
Mm-hmm.
He had apartments above the Federated store. He had 7 apartments
That he rented out. Okay.
that he rented out. He had a furniture store, and later he rented that furniture store into a Giovanni's store in Martin.
Pizza. Okay.
Yeah, Pizza Hut. Not Pizza Hut, but Pizza Restaurant, which was the Giovanni's chain. And he rented that, and then he was in the candy business for a little while, but I think he got out of that.
Then he built the motel in Lexington.
He built a motel in Lexington. He spent a lot of time back and forth between the motel and Lexington. They bought a home in Lexington, and my family moved. All my brothers and sisters and mom moved to Lexington. And at first, they brought in some partners to run it, and then later that partnership sort of dissolved. They bought the former partners out, and Mother ran the motel. Mother and Jerry Roger ran the motel, and Dad went back and forth between Lexington and Martin. He had his home there in Martin, and he had a home there in Lexington. So Dad was always involved in some kind of business, but he loved Martin the best, and he came to Martin. That's where he stayed most of the time, and he looked after his businesses in Martin. Mother took care of the business there in Lexington, and Jerry Roger and Mother.
What's the name of that was built and named after him behind the dime store on the hill? Is that a senior citizens home? What is that?
Yeah, the one that was named after Dad when he was mayor. When Dad was mayor, he got a lot of those projects. I guess what you might call in that day and time, they had a lot of projects for the low-income people.
Yeah, okay.
And low-income housing.
Yeah, they still have that today.
Do they still have it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, Dad was successful in getting those low-income housing projects into Martin. And the one behind Martin was not named after him. The one named after Dad was one up there across, going out of Martin, across from BP station, Grigsby Heights, it's called.
Oh, okay.
Grigsby Heights. Then there's another one that was built later in Martin on up at Warcole. So and then he was responsible too for the housing project there in the Triangle area on Pageant Hill.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called Pageant Hill because years ago all the churches got together when I was a senior, 1952, and held a big pageant on that hill. It was a hillside at first.
Yeah.
It didn't have any housing projects on it. So we had what was called it was a Floyd County pageant about Christ. And
was it Easter or Christmas?
It was during springtime.
So it'd be Easter probably.
Yeah. And the churches got together, and our Mormon church was one of the main churches that promoted this project and that was involved in it. And I was selected to be the Christ in that
So you
pageant.
got to play Jesus.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. I was portrayed that. At first, I didn't want to do it because I didn't feel worthy, and I'm not still worthy to do that. But anyway, they talked me into it.
Yeah.
And that was called Pageant Hill. Well, later Dad developed a housing project there, and it's still called Pageant Hill Housing Project. And so anyway, that was a good part of Martin that was being developed at that time. Up at the Y, we called it. But anyway, Dad was a successful businessman, and later he sold me some property, or he gave me some property and sold it to me. I got him to go up there to Y and buy a lot of property, which was farmland. It was undeveloped property, and he bought a lot of property up there. And up at the Y now, you have a lot of restaurants, you have a lot of stores, you have Speedway, you have McDonald's, you have Rite Aid, you have banks, you have insurance companies. Up at the Y, that's where Martin really is today.
So some of that land you own now. What's on the land that you own that he gave you? What's that?
Well, the land that he gave me personally when he was still alive, and I was working at the Board of Education, is where me and Julius and Clint built Rite Aid, where Rite Aid is.
It's a shopping strip.
That little shopping strip.
Mm-hmm.
I owned the property, and I got Julius and Clint going business with me,
Mm-hmm.
and we put a small shopping strip.
Okay.
Been quite successful.
Yeah, it's busy all the time.
We got
isn't it?
Family Dollar on one end, Rite Aid on the other end, the anchor stores, and in between we got the flower shop. We got insurance company,
Mhm.
and we got what would you call the film store? What's that called, Pete?
You mean like
You know,
photo editing
where they
or-
sell the film and so forth.
Oh, a
disc or-
camera store or
Yeah.
computer store? or
Yeah,
something?
it got a store like that there.
Huh.
Plus, there's about 6 or 7 stores there on that shopping strip.
And the other piece of land you have that Speedway's a gas station.
Yeah, well, Dad, at his death, he made me executor of his properties in Martin, and I was to implement his will, which I did. And the Speedway, he left to me and Jan and Marina Ann,
Okay.
the 3 of us. He left all Martin to us, but and the reason he left Martin to me and Marina and Jan, and I'm talking about downtown Martin, where the stores were and his house was, where he lived, and the parking lots and 9 or 10 pieces of property down at Martin was. He just simply said, "Well, I've given the rest of them more, but I've given you 3, so I won't give all 3 of you Martin."
Oh, okay.
Well, that didn't go so good with Charles and Lynn, and we went to court over it. Charles took us to court, and so I thought about it with Marina and Jan as we were separated. Each other was getting ready for the trial, as Charles had sued the 3 of us. He's saying that all 8 children should own that property downtown, and all of Martin really sued us for all of Martin. So I got Marina Ann and Jan to say, well, let's let everybody share downtown and we keep Speedway.
Mm-hmm.
And so we made that offer to them. And I said, that's the only offer we're going to make. We make it through our attorneys. Well, we made it to Charles and Lynn, and they accepted. So downtown Martin, well, I call downtown Martin, is owned by all 8 of us children. And up there at Speedway is mine and Jan's and Reed Ann's.
Okay.
And since Jan is deceased, and his share will go to his children. And so that's the way that works.
Well, Martin, we'll stick with Martin for this topic because Martin was a thriving town, big town. It had lots of businesses at one time, the main street and all that. And I remember as a kid, it was still doing fairly well. I know you had movie theaters downtown, you had restaurants and all that. But let's go back in time a little bit, though. I want you to tell the story you told us at Thanksgiving. We're going to do the church thing separate sometime, history of the church.
Yeah.
But I do want you to tell just briefly the story you told us at Thanksgiving about the first missionaries who did come through Martin and how it actually got started, because the Grigsby family was one of those first families, right?
Right.
All right. So tell that one, if you can recall around what date period that was, because the LDS Church built up to be a good-sized church for a small Eastern Kentucky town. But go ahead and tell us the story about the early missionaries. And you said they used to live with you too, didn't they?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Well, we're going to have to go back to the 1800s. How Martin became Martin. Is that okay?
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. The Grigsby family. Dad's from Perry County. He married my mother from Floyd County in Martin, who was a Ratliff and a Crisp, and my grandmother was a Ratliff and a Crisp, and that's my mother's mother. And Martin got started in 1800s up in the area called Bucks Branch. In 1800s, it wasn't Martin as known downtown Martin or up at the Y Martin, but it got started up ahead of Bucks Branch, and it was started by our great-great-grandfather, Smalley Crisp,
Okay.
C-R-I-S-P, and he came from Arkansas. and he lived up in the head of Bucks Branch, and his name was Smalley Crisp. He married Caroline Frazier. This is all genealogy, and it's been searched out and been proven to be factual. And they had 12 children.
Wow.
12 children. They had 8 sons and 4 daughters. And we are descendants of one of the daughters. One of the daughters. Well, anyway, that was a big family, and they intermarried and so forth, and filled Bucks Branch up pretty good. And it came down to the other side of the creek in Martin, and that was called Martin. And at first, it was called Smalley, Kentucky. Gardus Dingus, years ago, and when I was a boy growing up in Martin, he had a hardware store up at the red light across from Pure Oil Station. And he'd take us boys, and I was, say, 10, 11, 12 years old, walking around on the streets and stuff, and he'd bring us in this store, and he showed us a safe, a first big safe of Smalley, Kentucky, and it had on it Smalley, Kentucky in print. And it was a big metal safe where you kept money in.
Mm-hmm.
And he had somehow, that came into his possession, and he was proud of it. He kept it in the back of his store. And he showed us boys, he said, he was the one that told us this was not Martin, Kentucky all the time. It used to be Smalley, Kentucky, after Smalley Crisp. Well, anyway, Martin became a depot. The railroad came through, and somehow they asked the crowd that gathered for the opening of the christening of the depot what they should name the depot. In those days, the post office was named different, the depots were named different, the signs on the roads were different. Each little community had 2 or 3 different names. But one in the crowd suggested it be named after Martin. I understand, after Martin Hunter. And they said, call it Martin. And they did. And they put their sign up at depot with Martin on it. The railroad company, station, depot was Martin Depot. So that was on the other side of the creek. That's on the Bucks Branch side of the creek. Where the school is now, and where downtown Martin was, and where it still is a little bit, that became New Martin.
New Martin.
New Martin.
Which today is now Old Martin.
Yeah. Today it's destroyed Martin.
Yeah.
By the government and by our own local people.
That's a different
our
name.
local government, who really is a shame, in my opinion, what they did to our little town. It's a disaster.
But you grew up, so then you grew up on that side of the river, which was considered New Martin.
Right, and that's where they built the school.
That's where they built the school, grandpa's stores, all that, were on that side of the river.
And when I was born and raised up in Martin, that main street was not paved. It was a dirt road, a gravel road. And my mother, who lived there where the post office is now, because her parents owned that property and had a house there, a dwelling house. And she was one of the first graduates of Martin High School,
Wow.
1927.
Wow.
And she went on from there to Moorhead, where she met my dad, who came from Hazard High School and played football at Moorhead.
And so they met at college and then came back to Martin.
They met at college and came back to Martin.
Okay.
But anyway, that's now about Bucks Branch and the church. Around the turn of 1900, there around, give a year or two either way, the Mormon missionaries came into Bucks Branch.
Mm-hmm.
You got to get the picture. There was no Martin as it is now. There was maybe New Martin getting started. Maybe I don't even know if a railroad was there.
Okay.
But anyway, they came into Bucks Branch, and they were walking. Some of them on horseback. And I always laughed and said, well, they chased into Martin by renegade people, chasing the Mormons out of their communities. But that wasn't true. It's just a joke I used to tell. But anyway, they came into Bucks Branch, and many of our ancestors and friends in Bucks Branch put them up. I think they lived in I've been told they lived in the loss of some barns, you know, slept on hay and stuff when they first came into Bucks Branch, and they were able to teach and preach the gospel to people in Bucks Branch, and many of them joined the church. And our ancestors were one of the first ones to join the church in Bucks Branch.
Which family was that? The Crisp?
Yeah, when you see, my grandmother and my great grandmother were Crisp,
Okay.
and
Ratliffs, right?
and Ratliffs. My great grandfather, my great uncle was Ratliff,
Okay.
and so my grandmother was a Ratliff with Crisp ancestry. Her mother was a Crisp.
So those were large families. So when they joined the church, you got a lot of members right there.
Absolutely,
So they established a small branch there then.
they had the Flannerys, Frasers, the Ratliffs, and the Crisp, and the Dinguses.
That's right.
All
Okay.
big families there and around Martin. There wasn't any real Martin then. But they all joined the church, and the church grew. I understand they started in a Sunday school, and I think Brother William Dingus, long deceased, Blanche and Philip's father, and Mama Dingus's husband, started Sunday school in Martin in the 1900s. And by 1920, it grew into a branch, what we call a branch. Martin was large enough to become a branch instead of just a Sunday school. Branch with branch president and counselors, Sunday school presidents, Relief Society presidents, and all of that. And they got a dwelling house that they made a church out of in 1920. Uncle Bill Flannery was our first president. Doc Hutchinson and my grandfather, P.C. Hayes, was second counselor.
So what you're saying is, so Grandma Grigsby, your mom, was basically raised in an LDS home.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So she went off when she grew up and then went off to college. She was a member of the church when she met Grandpa Grigsby.
Right.
Marina Hayes.
Yes.
Okay.
She was
All right.
already a member of the church.
She was already a member of the church.
Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, her sister, Wanda Hayes Elkins, she married Archie Elkins from Pike County. She was the second missionary from Martin to serve a mission in the church. Sister Dingus from the Dingus family was the first. I'm trying to think of her name. She was the first missionary from the Martin branch, and my Aunt Wanda was the second. That's mother's sister,
Okay.
younger sister. So yes, she was a member of the church, and it all came from her mother and her grandparents and her mother, and of course her mother married twice. The second marriage was P.C. Hayes, and he joined the church, and later was one of the leaders of the church, first branch in Martin, Kentucky. But growing up in Martin, we built the church across from the hospital down in lower end of Martin, across from the hospital. When I was a senior, the church members got together with the help of the church in Salt Lake and
down there
built.
where the Beaver Valley Hospital used to be. That
Yeah,
area.
down there where the hospital is now.
Oh, I thought there was.
Where the hospital is in Lower Martin, we built that two-story brick chapel there.
Okay, but before that, wasn't it?
Before that, that's behind the Beaver Valley
Yeah.
Hospital in a wooden frame house.
That's right. Down there.
Yeah.
What's that funeral home near there, near the railroad tracks?
Nelson Fraser.
Yeah, in that area. That's
Yeah.
where the first church was. The little white frame.
Yeah. White
Then
frame.
you built a red brick one across from the current hospital.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they're basically, and now the newer structures up on the mountainside. So you've got 3 LDS structures, I guess.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
The one down there at Martin was built when I was a senior in high school. I went 2 years later that it was dedicated, And your mother and I was the first marriage in that new chapel. That was new
the red
then.
brick one?
Yeah, and that brick one, July 7th, 1954. It had been dedicated just before that. It took a little while to build it. It was being built when I was senior there, and I went off to school at UK. And while I was at UK, it was completed. And then your mother and I was the first couple to be married there by the branch president, President Miller from out Idaho.
And back then you could get married, you got permission, it went to the temple a week later, right?
Yes, there weren't many temples back in those days. They had all out west, maybe 8 or 9 of them. Wasn't any of the temples
Yeah,
east
you're
of Mississippi.
basically in the Salt Lake City temple district, weren't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so President Miller got permission from the church to marry us civilly in the church, and
Yeah.
then travel on our honeymoon across to Salt Lake and Idaho Falls to be married in the temple. We were married at Idaho Falls Temple July 14th, 1954, a week after we were married in Martin in the chapel, in the new chapel by President Miller. And we traveled out there and was married at Idaho Falls Temple because the Salt Lake Temple was closed
Being renovated
for
or
cleaning and stuff,
Okay.
cleaning and renovating. They closed in July.
Wow.
But we went and stayed with President Miller's family up there in St. Anthony, Idaho. So it was a good thing. That's a nice temple up there in Idaho Falls.
It's still there, still operating.
Yeah.
Idaho Falls temple.
And then we honeymooned down in Salt Lake and all around, coming back to Martin.
The days before interstate highways, huh?
Oh yeah,
Took you a long time to get out to Salt Lake.
took about 4 days to get out there. 4 days and
Gosh.
nights. No air conditioning in those days, and motels are in cars or in homes. A little bit here and there, but not very, very, very little.
So you then, getting back to Grandma Grigsby and Grandpa Grigsby and Martin, then you were the oldest of 8 children, but all 8 children were raised in LDS Church, right, through Grandma.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And
Alright.
as far as I know, we were all baptized at 8. I know I was baptized at 8 by 2 missionaries who were staying with us in the Big Sandy River down at what we call Banner May Bend,
Mhm.
down at Allen. I was baptized there. We didn't have any baptismal fonts in that day, and didn't even have that chapel I was telling you about at 8 years of age. And Charles and David and Jerry, I think, all baptized at 8. Most all the kids were at 8 or 9 years of age. Mom really took care of that. And in those days growing up in Martin, when we had the chapel behind the Beaver Valley in the little frame house chapel, missionaries in those days stayed with families. They stayed with us, the Grigsby family, for about a week. Then they go to the Dingus family, and they stay about a week. They go to the Flannery family, or go to the families in the church and stay about a week at a time. It moves around. So growing up, we always wanted the missionaries to come to our house Christmas time. So we play games with them and everything.
Oh, that's good.
And whatever. But Dad always supported the church. He's the biggest money supporter, single individual money supporter the Mormon Church has ever had in Martin. When we built the chapel across from the hospital, he was the biggest donor, single donor.
Mm-hmm.
When we built the chapel we're in now, when we were district, I was district president, he was the single biggest donor for that chapel. He was not a member of the church, but he always supported the church, and he supported us going to church. So, and of course we all were LDS, and Dad was just the same as LDS. He's LDS now on the other side.
You took care of that, didn't you?
I took care of that in Louisville Temple after he died,
Yeah.
and so
Let me ask you-
I told him I would do it too, and he said, "Okay, go ahead."
You
He
didn't?
said
Okay.
he approved it when he's alive.
Well,
I said,
good.
"I'm not going to get to baptize you, Dad. Looks like you're in this life." I said, "How about me baptizing you by proxy in the Louisville Temple?" And I said, "Will you accept it?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Go ahead."
How about that?
He knew
I didn't know that.
he knew about baptism for the dead, you know. And I said, well, I'll get you on the other side then. So
That's awesome. Well, let me ask you this, since we're kind of on the topic of Martin and Grigsby's on this thing. Let's go back in time and let me see if I can get this right. Grandma Grigsby, who was Marina Hayes, right?
right,
Let me recap this. Her real father is the one who came from Italy.
yes.
Do you recall his name by memory? I know his real Italian name or his American.
Well,
We've got
the
pictures. We've got two
family
pictures.
claims that his Italian name was Puglisi,
That's what Grandma Grigsby wrote in the picture.
And,
Salvatore.
but his American name he went by Salvatore Paradise.
Solomon Paradise, right? And
That's right, Salvatore Puglisi. You're right.
Salvatore Puglisi.
And
is his real
Solomon,
name.
Solomon Paradise.
Was his American name.
Yeah. Okay.
All right,
Thanks.
So, so that's where we get our Italian look. And Grandma Grigsby looked very Italian, didn't she?
Oh yes, yes.
Okay. So that's where the Italian side comes through our grandmother, Marina Hayes.
Right.
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 All right. Grandpa Grigsby, the name Grigsby, if I'm correct, isn't that English?
Yes.
Okay, but he came from South
England.
And I'm not talking about the grandpa himself, Pete Sr. He came from Hazard area, Perry County, Kentucky.
Yeah.
That's where he was raised.
My dad was from Hazard area. He's from Lotts Creek, Kentucky, in Perry County, a few miles outside of Hazard. He was educated at Hazard High School, where he played basketball and football, and he got a football scholarship. He was so good, he went to Moorhead on football scholarship, and that's where he met my mother.
Now, maybe I made up this. His first name, which is our name, is Elhanan or Elhanan, which is biblical. Later in my college days, I found out it's Old Testament. He's mentioned twice in the Bible. Do you know anything about the history of the name when it comes to why was he named Elhanan Grigsby? Do you know anything about that?
Yes, his mother was a Combs. A big family in Perry County is the Combs, and in Knott County, Combs family is a big family. In fact, there's a community in Perry County named Combs, Kentucky.
Combs, Kentucky. Okay.
Yeah. And that's the same family that our governor, Bert T. Combs, came out of.
Okay.
Years ago, we built the Mountain Parkway and had all of these, what would you say, the lodge and the dams state parks.
Yeah.
He built a lot of those. But anyway, the Combs family, it's in the Combs family. Elhanan Combs was through the Combs family there in Perry County. It was biblical. And so, being a biblical Combs name, my grandmother named my dad Elhanan Combs. That wasn't his father's name.
She named him Elhanan Grigsby.
Yeah, Elhanan Grigsby. I'm right.
All right.
I'll
so
get
she
it right.
named him after Elhanan Combs. There was some Elhanan.
She named it after Elhanan Combs and
Okay.
Elhanan Grigsby.
So she marries a Grigsby, and she marries a Grigsby.
And my grandfather's name was Luke Pryor Grigsby.
Okay, Luke Pryor Grigsby,
And she named my dad Elhanan Grigsby.
Elhanan Grigsby. Okay, now, did I hear? Is this right or not? Was he really legally named Pete, middle name, or did he add that later?
I don't know. He said he added it later. I don't know.
See, that's the story I thought you told
Yeah.
me years ago, that he
Yeah.
was Elhanan Grigsby,
Yeah.
but somebody or somewhere started calling him Pete.
He was called Pete all during the school days when he played ball, basketball and football. He was known as Pete Grigsby.
But legally, that was not his name.
I don't know. I don't think so. I think he adopted it.
Okay, so he told you though later he added that as a legal name, his middle name?
Well,
Or not?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
He just said that apparently he did, because that's what he went by in his adult life, was Elhanan Pete Grigsby Sr. And they named me Elhanan Pete Grigsby Jr.
Yeah.
So apparently he adopted it, but he was known as Pete Grigsby all over Hazard, all over Perry County, and that's what I became known as, Pete.
Right.
That was the name that people called us by, and the name.
And that's the story I was getting to. I thought I had heard it one time.
Well,
maybe.
it might have been Pete. I'm not sure.
Elhannon's not an easy name for people to remember and call someone.
Yeah.
So
And,
maybe they just made up the name Pete.
Yeah, it's biblical. He's mentioned twice in the Old Testament. Elhanan is one of the 10 warriors of King David.
Now, he slew Goliath's brother.
Yeah, he slew. Later, it's mentioned in Genesis where he slew Goliath's brother.
Yeah.
So he was one of the main 10 captains of King David. Elhanan was, and it's biblical. He came out of Perry County.
Okay.
So anyway. Dad went by everything he signed and legal papers and all was Elhanan Pete Grigsby.
Elhannon Pete. Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
and
that's
in
good to
fact, it went so far as to shorten it and call himself E.P. Grigsby.
know. Was he called that later? People called him EP, or who was
Yeah,
that?
some people call him E.P.
EP.
He put that on his business there in Martin, E.P. Grigsby store,
That's true. Yeah.
and he signed some papers, E.P. Grigsby store, or E.P. Grigsby.
Right. So so then they meet. If I'm correct, they met at Morehead State. You said that at college. They
Yeah.
come back to Martin. Then they start their family. You're the oldest of 8. Is that correct? Yeah, 8 kids.
That's right.
And while we're on this subject, and you've told my kids this, and Grandpa Grigsby built up great businesses, but you guys didn't always have money, did you?
Oh.
Tell something about the chicken coop.
Chicken house.
You and Uncle Charles. You and
All right.
Charles, as little boys.
Let me tell you about that.
Tell us what your lifestyle was like as a little family
Growing up in Martin,
in Martin. Yeah,
a little old town, it was
you
really
didn't have internet. did
it
you?
wasn't even a town really when we grew up in it. It was out in the country.
So
But anyway, Mom and Dad met in Morehead. He was playing football and she was on a music scholarship.
Yeah,
Mom was a great musician.
she's the first one to get a music scholarship. Was it Morehead?
I think so. And she studied music at Cincinnati Conservatory before she met Dad. And she had an operatic voice. She had a great voice. And she used to sing in church and used to sing in conferences. And people always remembered my mother. She could play the piano.
Did she play at the movies, silent movies?
Yeah, hey, that's right. You
So
remember
tell
that.
Yeah. She played-
Back in those days, as she was growing up in her 20s, they had silent movies. And
But she'd
they
have
hired her
live-
to play the piano.
She would be the
during
live
silent-
music.
Yeah.
That's
She'd
fun.
play the background music for the silent
For the
movies
movies.
in Martin. Yeah.
That's wild.
But anyway, they met at Morehead, fell in love, and got married. Mom was a junior, and Dad was a freshman at the end of freshman year. Well, she brought him back to Martin in Floyd County to live with her parents, who had a home there where downtown post office is now. They sold that later to the U.S. government for a post office next to a Federated store. So anyway, she came back and got a job as teacher at Wheelwright grade school, and they went to Wheelwright, and Dad got a job in the commissary. The coal companies used to have stores. They built the houses, they paid the miners, got the coal, and the miners all traded with them in their stores. And it's called commissaries. So Dad got a job working in the stores there, and that's how he learned his store business, was working in the commissary. Well, I came along after the first year of their living and teaching up there, and I guess I came along at the wrong time. I was born August 25th, 1934, right at the start of the Depression, and so for some reason they moved in on my grandparents, Grandma Hayes and Grandpa Hayes in Martin.
Okay.
And they moved in on them with me. And I was 3 months old, I've been told, when they couldn't earn a living. She couldn't teach because school had already started.
Oh.
And so she didn't have a teaching job. And Dad didn't have a job. So I think Grandma got tired of them doing nothing, sitting around, and said, find something to do. So some reason they decided to borrow some money from Burl Spurlock in Prestonsburg, $50, what they told me. And they bought items, dolls, toys, flowers, just anything in the world that, trinkets or whatever, different bowls and pitchers and glasses and whatever in those days, whatever they would sell. And they started out door to door selling items. So Grandma and Grandpa had next to their house had a chicken house, little chicken house.
Okay.
And that's where the Federage store is now.
Okay.
Is where a chicken house was. And they told me they cleaned it up and built shelves in it and went in the store business.
So the chicken house became the first store.
First store. And on the back of it, they built two little rooms. The rooms were not any bigger than this room, both of them. And that's where I was raised. And Charles came along in 1936. And we were raised in the back of that store, Charles and I were. We had outhouses, we had chickens, we had hogs, we had a garden.
So you used the outhouses.
Yeah. We didn't have running water.
Yeah.
They had a well. And Mom would wash me and Charles when we were little kids. She bathed us in a wash pan, about that big. And that's how she bathed us and washed us, cleaned us up. And Dad in front had the store.
Yeah.
And he built, when he built those two rooms on the back, he tore down the chicken house and built a new frame for the store.
So he slowly expanded.
Yeah, slowly expanded.
And how old were you then when he built the house across the street eventually, right? The bigger home?
Well, gee, that across the street, the two-story house was when I was 10 years old.
10.
We had another house where the current E.P. Grigsby store is now was what we called a shotgun frame house that he bought off a man who lived in Bucks Branch. He got enough money to buy that house, which was sitting next to his first business there.
Okay.
And it was in the place where the E.P. Grigsby store is now.
Okay. So
That's where we were raised till we were 10 years old.
So
we
you
got
went from a chicken
we got
house
to running, from a chicken house
to that house.
to that house, and of course he built the store around where he got started in the chicken house. So he got rid of the chicken house and built a store frame, and two rooms in the back. And then he bought this Pone Branham. He bought that house next door. It had 1, 2, 3, 4, about 6 rooms. He had a back porch, and we had property behind it. That's where I learned to play a lot of basketball because he put me a basketball goal up in the back of that house.
Oh, wow.
And but anyway, Dad expanded and bought that house. That's the first running water we had too. We had a Victory Garden, and he went over to farm over at Hazard. He always took us over on Sundays to visit with his mother on Lots Creek Farm. They had a big farm up there. And we go over there and play with our cousins. They all lived in Hazard, his brother's kids and his older sister kids. And they'd have a big Sunday celebration, family celebration. And one time he brought back a little old pig, and we raised it in the backyard there. And it became... we called it Snow White after Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. That was a movie. That was a movie back then.
Snow White?
Yeah, and it grew as monster pig, and Dad had it slaughtered, and we ate on that meat for a couple winters.
What?
Yeah.
So how did you feel about raising a pig and calling it Snow White? Then you ate on it.
Well, we didn't see the slaughter. We only. The boys, we were smaller, and we just ate the meat, which was good. We didn't want to see a Snow White killed, but in those days they slaughtered them early in the mornings, real early, daybreak when it's cold and stuff. But anyway, we hated that. We didn't want to see Snow White killed. But we had a Victory Garden, had Snow White, and had chickens. And Charles and I, growing up, used to have the responsibility, the task of each morning before we ate breakfast and go to school. Each morning, I'd take one morning, Charles take the next morning. We alternated, and we go out and get the eggs out from under the chickens
Yeah.
in the little chicken house. And boy, I hated that. They pecked my hands to death. You know, we had to get those eggs out from under them. They didn't like it. But those are eggs that we were raised on, right there in Martin.
Wow, you've come a long way.
Well, people didn't have much in those days. There weren't many cars. There was no television.
Yeah.
You got all your news by radio.
That's why you played a lot of basketball too, huh?
Yeah. Wasn't really many things to distract you from playing sports or basketball, really. Wasn't even football, it was basketball mostly.
So at what age did you get started? I know you played a lot of basketball, and that's a different story. You played for Kentucky, but at what age did Grandma Grigsby get you involved with music?
4th grade.
4th grade. What did you do in 4th grade?
She bought me a saxophone and stuck me in a band. And I guess the band director wouldn't say no to her, so I learned to play in the Martin High School band in the 4th grade, saxophone.
So
E-flat alto.
Okay. So
E-flat
that's where we get the
alto.
alto sax lineage, because a lot of us played alto sax in
It
schools.
passed down through the Grigsby family.
Yeah, Jerry and Gay.
Yeah. It passed
I
down to
played
my
alto
brother
sax.
Jerry and my brother David.
Yeah.
They became really good at saxophone, especially David. Became excellent.
Would you briefly on Uncle David? Was he, of the 8 children, do you think he might have been the most talented musician?
Yes.
I mean, I've heard stories.
Yeah.
The way he could just play.
Yeah,
the
he
sax.
was. He was a great, talented musician.
Probably play many instruments, couldn't he? Or I know his son Davo could.
Yeah. Davo was talented.
Oh, Davo could play. Davo taught me drums when I
Yeah.
was real little. Davo could play guitar, sax, drums. He played it all.
He was a talented musician, like his
So-
father. Yeah.
So 4th grade alto sax, and then you said Uncle Charles played sax also.
No, Charles.
What Charles?
Charles, that's another story. Charles was, anyway, Charles tried to play the trumpet.
Yeah.
He tried it. But, well, really, he didn't try it. He faked his way to playing the trumpet. That's the truth. We had the junior band and senior band back in those days at Martin.
Yeah.
And, of course, I was in the senior band, and I learned to play saxophone pretty good. Mom got me started on the piano in the 2nd grade, and I couldn't. I just didn't like the piano. I couldn't coordinate the right hand, left hand together
Yeah.
to read the music, but I could the right hand. I was good at the right hand, and so that's why she gave me saxophone. Because as you know, it's just one line that you have to read.
Yeah. Oh, I see. One line reading music.
Yeah, one line reading music, and I was pretty good at that.
Okay.
So that's how come she got me a saxophone and got me in the band. And I played the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade in the band at Martin. And anyway, Charles came along, and they couldn't catch him long enough to have him play any kind of music. But he got to the end, when we went to school in grade school, he got to thinking that, well, I ought to be in a band too, like Junebug, or Junie. He called me Junebug, Junie. And I ought to be in a band too. He wanted to do things like I did. He wanted to play basketball like I did. He wanted to play the music like I did, which was fine. I didn't care. I thought that was great, give him something to do. And he really, it's really unbelievable, but they had a junior band in those days, and when I was about the 8th grade or 7th grade, he was a grade behind me. And he got Mom to buy him a trumpet. He got to think he wanted to play the trumpet.
Yeah.
So in those days, you could practice band in school time. I mean, you have 6 periods, say, band.
Right.
And anyway, somehow he got promoted from the junior band to the senior band. And we were practicing in the band room where the senior band was, and he was playing the trumpet, supposedly. And I was on the sax, And we was playing some kind of tune, I don't know, the marching tune. Elliot's up there, he's beating at the time. You know how we do. And so One said, "Stop! Hold it! Stop it! Something wrong here. Let's try it again." All right. We played the march tune again. He says, "Hold it! Stop!" So, he took a section by section. Took the clarinets, saxophones, and the trumpets, and the percussions, trombones and all that stuff. And we played that song for him, and he listened to us. So we passed the test. Clarinets passed the test. The trombones passed the test. The drummer, and he got to the trumpets. And they played. He didn't know. He said, "Play it again." And he said, "Hold it right here." Then he broke it down, had each one to play the part. And he got to Charles. And Charles had been faking it all the time.
Oh no!
He was faking the fingering.
Movements, everything.
Yeah. And when he made him blow it, well, he was the one making the bad noises.
Oh no!
So he kicked Charles out.
Oh no!
Because Charles was playing the bad notes. And I told Charlie later, I said, "Charles, why you faked it all the way?" I said, "Why did you try to play at this time?" And when we were practicing for whatever, a marching band or something.
Yeah.
He said, "I just wanted to give it a try." And I said, "You gave it a try at the wrong time." And he kicked Charles out of the band. Charles couldn't play a note.
Oh, how old was Charles? What year was that?
And when he was 7th grade and I was 8th grade.
Okay. So he never returned to band after that?
No, he wasn't interested.
That's
He just
okay,
gave him a period to go get out of the classroom.
I think his daughter Susie and them made up for the music bit though.
Yeah.
He had some really talented kids.
But he didn't really care for music. He just wanted to go to band because I was in band, I guess.
Yeah. Well, he loves his big brother. You guys hung out together all the time.
Well, we were raised together, and when I went to school, in those days, when we moved over to Pone Branham's little house, we didn't have gas heat. We had coal heat.
Yeah.
Coal grates. And you burned your own coal. When you stoked it, you carried out the ashes and stuff, and you bought coal and burned coal. And I'd get dressed. Mom would dress me in front of that fireplace when I went to first grade. And in those days, boys wore little knickers. You know what knickers are? Stockings, and the pants would come down over top of it.
Yeah.
Boys in those days wore what we call knickers.
Yeah, they were
Stockings.
way up high and tight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Mom would dress me, and so when she dressed me to go to my first day of school, Charles woke up with me, and he had the awfulest fit there was on Mom. He wanted to go too. He wanted to go to school with
So how old
with
was he?
Junior. He was 4 and I was 6.
Okay, and you're going to school, and he couldn't go to school, but
He was. I wasn't going to school. I was getting ready to go to school, and he took a fit on Mom. And well, they couldn't do anything with my brother Charles. When he took a fit, or got angry, or wanted his way, he got it.
Yeah.
I mean, he wore him out. He wore the whole family out. But Mom dressed him up.
Yeah.
And said, "Now, Pete Jr., you go down." We just had to walk a little ways. She'd say, "Pete Jr., now you hold his hand and walk down the sidewalk to school." I said, "But Mom, he's not old enough. They might not let him in school." She said, "Well, when we come to that, we'll see what happens."
We'll see what happens. Okay. All right.
So I take him by the hand and we walk to school together.
Yeah.
And I go in and we get all settled with the teacher. Maud Hall was my first grade teacher. She used to cook up here at McDowell. You might remember her. Maud Hall,
Huh.
the big woman.
Okay.
She was my first grade teacher at Martin.
Okay.
She's from McDowell. And anyway, she was a head cook there at McDowell when we ate in the frame house there. Yeah. But anyway, she was my teacher. And of course, I passed everything. I was eligible age-wise. So I was, and it came to Charles, and she said, "What's your name?" "Charles Gary Grigsby." "How old are you?" He didn't say nothing. "Is this your brother Pete?" "Yes." how old is he? I said, well, Charles Taylor. I'm 4. 4 years old? Well, you're not supposed to be here. You have to go back home. You can't come to school when you're 4 years old. Said, you have to be 6. He said, I'm not going back home. I'm going to stay here with Junie. Me, He was right. And she couldn't make him go home. She asked him to go home, just lived up the street.
Yeah.
He wouldn't go. So anyway, first day of school, he got sit with me all day long.
Yeah.
And she told him at the end of the day not to come back because he wasn't old enough. So next day we went through the same thing. Mother had to dress him, come back to school with me. And I had to tell the teacher that he wouldn't stay at home. He had to come to school. So she calls the principal up. She gets the principal down there on Charles. And he still won't leave. So he's going to talk to Mom about it. He stays in school with me all this time. I'm learning ABCs, what have you, 1, 2, 3. And Charles is in there with me.
Yeah.
But they're not teaching him. He's just sitting there with me.
And he was content with that.
Yeah.
He just sat there at school.
As long as he was with me, he was content.
That's kind of sweet, though. Dad.
When we were raised together, like I told you, just 2 years apart. But he wanted to do what I did or be with me. We were just buddies, I guess. And so anyway, the principal came down on him and told him not to come back. And so the next day he comes back. And the principal then goes see his mom. And Mom tells she can't do a thing on earth with him. So they let him sit there all year long.
All year?
All year long.
The whole school year?
Yep.
Uncle Charles
And he came to school with me the whole year. My first grade, primer first semester, first grade second semester. That's the way it was then. The whole school year he was with me at school.
Wow.
Now, we come down to the second school year. I'm promoted to the second grade.
Right.
So Charles thinks he's going to go second grade with me. So he comes down to second grade, and he comes with me to second grade. But this time, Buddy, they take him by the hand and put him in the first grade.
But they let him go to first
They
grade.
let him go to primer in first grade. He's 5. And that's why he's 1 grade behind me. He should have been 2 grades behind me.
But they let him start early, it sounds like that.
They did. They let him start in the first grade early, or
Okay.
primer first grade.
But he probably breezed through first grade, didn't he? After having it twice.
Charles was smart. He never had any trouble really getting. He didn't study half the time,
Yeah.
but he didn't have any trouble. It almost knocked him out of going to college because he didn't study in high school much.
Yeah.
But he was smart. He just didn't want to.
Yeah. Very smart though.
Yeah. But anyway, that's the way we went to school. He's 1 grade behind me, and but he went to school with me and he would have gone right on through if they'd let him.
How about that? That is neat. And then who's the third child born? It's,
David Lee.
how many more years is that? How much younger was Uncle David to Uncle Charles?
There's 2 years difference between the first 6 of us.
Oh, okay.
David was 4 years behind me, 4 years in age.
So by the time you were going to school and Uncle Charles wouldn't go with you, Uncle David was born, right?
Yeah.
So Uncle David was a little bit.
Yeah, he was born in 38.
Okay.
September 14th, 1938. And my sister Lynn, the youngest of the Grigsby family, was born on the same day, September 14th.
Oh, they shared the same birthday.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. And she's 11 years behind me, so I'd put her in 45, I think. Yeah, 45. September 14th, 45.
Did all the Grigsby children, the 8 of you, go through the Martin school?
No. Because in 1959, they moved to Lexington. That's when Dad built a motel.
Yeah.
And Mom wanted to move to Lexington, and she did. And
It was that early? I thought it was like in the 60s, 70s.
No, it's 60. Motel was completed and opened in 1960.
And that's when Grandma Grigsby physically moved to Lexington?
She moved in, I think, the latter part of 59.
Oh, I didn't know it was that early. Okay.
Yeah, now,
So then, by that time, then what children went? So some of the children, then the younger children, went to school down there.
they went to, graduated at Bryan Station.
Oh,
They lived on the north side of town.
yeah.
And I don't know which grade schools they went to, but I know they went to high school at Bryan Station High School in Lexington. Now, one time I think, let's see, now David Lee and Jerry both graduate from Martin.
But now then at one time,
I think at one time maybe Jerry had to come back and stay a little bit with Dad to graduate from Martin.
yeah, but they all lived at one time. Though, didn't Aunt Lan and Aunt Sweetie, though, they started out school in Martin, right?
Yes, yeah.
You're just saying later, as they grew older, they didn't
Yeah,
go to Martin
but
High
the twins started out in Martin too,
Okay.
but they ended up in Bryan Station.
Okay. So by the time the twins were in high schools, by the time she moved, and I guess is that when Lynn and all of them kind of followed?
Yeah,
and-
they all moved the family. They were children
Okay.
in the family, and they moved to Lexington.
Okay.
And so anyway, that was I believe Jerry graduated from Martin too. I believe he did. That's four. First four was me and Charles,
First four
David,
went
and
to
Jerry,
Old Martin. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
and then the last four I think graduated in Lexington. I think Jerry moved to Lexington with them, but in order to finish up school in Martin, I believe he came back and lived with Dad
Mm-hmm.
in Martin and finished up school in Martin. I believe that's what happened there, but I believe he graduated in Martin. See, 1960. I don't know where I was. Yeah, in '60 I was over at MC Napier, coaching and teaching
Okay.
by that time.
Because by the time you graduated high school, you went to play for Kentucky. You'd already been dating Mom.
Yeah, we dated in high school. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I got that on, the last video we shot. I got about how you and Mom met, and she was going to McDowell, you were at Martin,
Yeah.
and that you MC Napier. Okay. So, all right. Well, I think this has been great. I want to get more of the Grigsby history of Martin area on this one. The reason I have to kind of close it, my new camera here only has so much memory in it. It says I've only got 12 minutes left, and it's full.
Yeah.
So I can't really do much more tonight until I put all this on a computer.
Is there anything you'd like to
Well,
about?
is there anything story-wise you want to share about your Martin days? Because when I come back, I'm gonna do more of this with you.
Yeah.
Each time I come back for a visit, we're gonna set this up and record more of your history.
Have I talked much about the town growing up in it?
You kind of drew a picture of the new Martin versus
But let's say growing up in Martin, maybe I can talk about that.
yeah. You got so you got 12 minutes before it shuts off.
Okay. Growing up in Martin, when Dad had a store next to the house I was telling, the frame house that he bought,
Yeah.
I was 5 years old. And Dad started me out dribbling the basketball in the front room on the sofa, like over here. And back in those days, the basketball it was a heavy leather basketball with laces.
The laces, yeah.
And so he would go to the store, which was next door, and he'd give me a basketball, and he'd say, this is what I want you to be doing while I'm at the store. And he showed me how to dribble that ball. I'd be sitting down, and I'd dribble it just knee high with my right hand. And then I'd dribble it for a while with my left hand. And then I'd dribble with both hands, right, left, right, left. And he'd say, now dribble that until I come back. Well, in those days too, when that ball bounced on that lace, it didn't have a true bounce. It'd go to the right or left or up and down. And so you had to learn to control the ball even when you dribbled on the lace.
Yeah.
So one night he forgot to come back. It must have been near Christmas time. And I was dribbling and I was wore out. And finally, my arms were so tired I couldn't lift them. And so I took a basketball and went over to the store. I said, Dad, I said, I'm tired. I can't dribble anymore. You forgot. Oh, he said, I'm sorry, son. I forgot. You know. But I never will forget that because I dribbled. I guess that's how I learned to dribble basketball so good. And I was a good ball handler. Nobody could take a ball away from me. And I dribbled low. I learned to dribble low, see, doing like that.
Yeah.
But growing up in Martin, it was a great little town. It certainly was. And a lot of the boys had basketball goals. I had a basketball goal in my backyard, and we had basketball goals down at the school. And so, in those days, there was only two sports in Martin, basketball and baseball. And that's what the boys did in Martin. And we played each other's at the goals and everything. I would go up. Roy and Blake had a good basketball goal, and I had one, and Don Fraser had one up Fraser Holler, he and Randy. And there was one down on the playground, so we played a lot of basketball on outdoor goals. And 2-on-2, 1-on-1, stuff like that. And that's how my brother David got his nickname. He'd follow me up to watch me play basketball during the summertime, baseball in the summertime, basketball in the fall. And that's how he got his nickname Leach. The boys named him Leach because he'd tag along after me every day when I go to play. But anyway, I started out in basketball, and then in the 6th grade, and I made good grades. Now, it wasn't all basketball, because when I came home after school, my mother put me to study. And that's what we did, you guys. Phyllis had you kids to study when you came home from school. My mother did me the same way. I made good grades. I was valedictorian in the grade school in the 8th grade because I made good grades. And so I played basketball and studied. That was it. And baseball and study. During the summertime, it was more fun because we didn't have to study. We played baseball everywhere. We played baseball down at Martin. We go up, catch a train, the passenger train, and a bunch of us boys go up and play McDowell up at McDowell. We go to Allen, play Allen on the passenger train. We go up Wright Beaver, play at Garrett. And it was fun. We'd ride on the passenger train up to the head of Left Beaver and get off at McDowell. And when we caught it, we'd play our baseball game and they'd catch it coming back.
That fascinates me. I mean, those are days I just can only imagine that you were actually catching the train up here to ride up to a different town and play.
Oh, it was fun. It was fun riding those trains. My grandpa Hayes was an engineer on those trains. And we used to play over by the depot, play baseball, and when he'd come through, he says playing, and he'd get on that whistle, he'd go, woo, woo, woo. We'd wave at him.
So these were actually passenger trains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were fun to ride. And we had to innovate in those days, you know.
Yeah.
We didn't have everything at our fingertips, but we innovated our playtime and what to do. And it was great fun. It was fantastic fun. And when we got our bicycles at Christmas, we rode all over town. We'd take a notion and ride to Allen and back. We'd ride up Left Beaver and back on bicycles, you know, just to get out.
That was a pretty good haul, wasn't it?
Yeah. We did a lot of that bicycle riding. We'd like to get up on the Audition Hill and coast, see how far we could coast through Martin. Because he went down there by the school, that hill
Oh, the one
comes
from
down.
the church. They go down the big hill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'd see how far we could out-coast the others on our bicycles and stuff.
Now, you said that before that road wasn't even paved, right? It was a dirt road?
When I was around 2 and 3 and 4, it wasn't. But when it got paved when I was around
so when
about
it snowed,
about 4 or 5
when it
years
snowed,
old.
did you use that hill for sledding? Where did you go for?
Upon the hill there behind where the housing project is now. It was a great hill to slide off from.
Right.
Oh yeah, it was a big hill. It was a dandy. When we got sleighs and it got snow, we found that hillside behind the housing project a great place to slide off from.
Yeah.
It was really good. But in Martin, like I said, we had the school, we had drugstores, we had theaters, we had playgrounds, we had five and dime stores, clothing stores, jewelry stores, restaurants. Had everything right there compact in a
Right
little
on
town.
one big street.
And you could, the farthest way was the ballpark. And that, you walked down the ballpark from where we lived right there in Martin. We was raised right on this main street in Martin, and moved over to the back street a little bit on Riverfront Street. But we was raised right there in Martin, so we was right in the middle of the action. Anything can happen.
That's good.
And growing up, Lawrence Keithley had a nice theater. The best in Eastern Kentucky at the time, yellow brick with a balcony.
I've seen pictures of it.
And he had movies every night, Monday through Sunday. He had matinees on Saturday and Sundays.
Yeah.
And you could go to a movie and see a double feature rather, for a quarter. And a restaurant right across the street from it. And Lawrence would stop in the middle of a movie and say, "It's time for red pop and popcorn." And everybody go back and get him a box of popcorn and red pop.
He just stopped the movie?
He stopped the whole movie so people go back and get their popcorn and pop. Red pop.
You don't see that today.
The people loved it.
How about that? Let me just pause this movie.
Yeah, everybody go back and he'd have a lot of popcorn popped up.
And go buy my popcorn.
And give me some popcorn and pop.
I'll start the movie after all of you buy my popcorn.
The first unofficial date I had with your mother, I had asked her for a date. We had met, and I told you that story before. And we had talked on the phone, and there's a restaurant called the Hobnob right across from the theater in Martin, right in front of our house, really, where we lived. And it's on Front Street, Main Street. And your mother told me, "Well, I'll be coming to the show Wednesday night." And said, I'll see you down there maybe, you know. So I saved up my quarter because that's what it costs. I thought I might go and see if I could bid. Well, anyway, I was at the restaurant, and you get hot dogs for a dime and a pop for a nickel in those days. And I was probably eating a hot dog and a pop or something. And she comes in the front of the restaurant with Sam Jr. And Sam's just about that high.
Her little brother.
Her little brother. And I said, "Why there? You going over the movie?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "I got to get Sammy something here, some ice cream." I think what he had to have or something. And I said, "I'll see you over there." She said, "Okay." So she takes little Sammy across the street and goes in the theater. So I didn't offer to take her because I didn't have money. She wouldn't accept it anyway because we hadn't officially had a date.
Oh, okay. But you had enough to go to the movie yourself.
Yeah, I'd saved myself a quarter. So so I had a quarter, and I waited till they got over there and got in. The movie actually waited till it started, and I went in. And so when I went in, I looked down about 10 rows in the middle, and there she was, sitting with little Sam.
Yeah.
Little Sam was on her right-hand side. Her dad, Sam Sr., was back about 4 or 5 rows.
Behind them. Okay.
Behind him. And there wasn't many there that night. It was Wednesday night. And I saw him sitting down there, and the left-hand side was open. The seats next to her was wide open.
Oh, boy.
And I said, "Oh, well, that's interesting." So I go down the left-hand aisle, there was 2 aisles in the theater, and I was on the left-hand side. And the seats next to her was on the left-hand side. So I just walked down and walked in to that row of seats, sit down next to her.
How about that?
And that was the first time I really dated her. It wasn't really a date. It was sort of unofficial, a date. And halfway through the movie, I got up enough nerve to hold her hand.
Wow, you smooth are you?
I tell you what, when I look back at it, I moved pretty fast.
You're aggressive, yeah.
I'm very aggressive.
And Grandpa Martin sat back there and didn't say
He's back there back.
Oh, he didn't know if you were holding the hand or not.
No. I didn't hold it up so he could see it.
I'm
But anyway, and then when the movie was over, I said, well, "I'll see you Saturday night." She hadn't told me if I could have a date Saturday night. And when you had a date with her in those days, you had to go to their house.
Yeah.
And the date was in the house. You didn't go out in the cars or anything like that. You went to their house. And so she said, yeah, I'll see you Saturday night.
Good for you, Dad.